Hello.
Hey, what's going on? Hey, what's up? What's up? Can you hear me?
Good to see you. I'm representing
Oh, thank you.
Sampling Diversity.
You know what? I need to take a photo. Let me see if I can take a screenshot.
Okay.
I'm up here trying to be cute and losing you. There I am. Okay.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. So we have a few more people who've joined us. So we're going to get started, Dr. Cox. So welcome everyone to Manifesting Healing Monday. I'm Dr. Kamani. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. And today we're going to be talking about Black women and workplace bullying. And just to frame the discussion before I have a conversation with our guest, workplace bullying is more common than many people think. And it refers to when you're receiving repeated negative treatment from others in a way that is threatening, intimidating, demoralizing, humiliating, and or may impact your work performance. So many times workplace bullying is generally often done by those who are in positions of authority above us. And there's often this concern about retaliation. There's also information that shows that Black women are disproportionately impacted by workplace bullying. So thought this was the appropriate time to talk about it. I've been hearing more Black women talking about it. And so we wanted to really provide this space for us to have conversation about workplace bullying and to talk about ways to possibly manifest healing in relation to it, right? So we have our special guest today, Dr. Monica Cox, who is my Spelman sister. So thank you, thank you for coming today. So Dr. Cox, I want to just ask you to just introduce yourself. And if you see I'm wearing one of her shirts, Stop Playing Diversity. She has a lot of wonderful, wonderful items on her website. And I also have two of her mugs. And then one refers to diversity, and it says, instead of showing me your diversity statement, show me hiring data, discrimination claim stats, salary tables, retention numbers, diversity policies, leaders' public actions against racism, right? So she's talking about more than just that performative, diversity. She's looking at, like, what's the proof, right? So we say one thing, but is there any action to back it up? And then I also purchased, there's so many items I want to purchase, but I also purchased the other mug that says, I am not an angry Black woman. I'm a Black woman whose questions make people angry. There's a difference. Okay. So now I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Cox, to introduce yourself and particularly to talk about, your title as an authenticity coach.
Yes, thank you, sis. I'm gonna call you sis. So if you
Okay.
maybe that's a
I'll call
little.
you sis too.
Thank you. Yes, we sis. So yes, let me tell you. So I am a professor by day and an activist every other hour, every other minute. But I am engineering education. I have a background in engineering education. But I have been in the academy for about 20 years. And I always said that I wanted to focus on my research. And so in engineering, and I focus on assessment, evaluation, graduate education, leadership, because I never wanted to be in this diversity, equity, and inclusion stereotype. Like, I never wanted to work, even though I knew it was necessary. But when I began to experience some of the negativity in the workplace, I said, someone has to do it. And I think I have to do this. And so that also led me to being an authenticity coach, because I think and almost everyone I know who's in academia knows how to code switch. We know how to assimilate. We know how to put on the mask that you have with your image. But I just think that we need to flip the script and start being authentic, because we're not going to be happy if we're in the workplace just faking. Like, that's very exhausting. And I love how, I think you and I were talking about the masks.
Yeah.
And you have masks on all day. That is to breathe. And that is
really
to think about what we do as well. So that's me, professor turned authenticity coach, activist, scholar, everything, sister, friend, truth teller. Yeah.
All that, all that. I love it. I love it. So in the sense of, in these work environments, how can we show up as our true selves, right? And show up in terms of affirming our worth, and to be respected in doing that. And I think the challenge is that, and when we talk about the mask and other things that have happened, or that do happen in the workplace to Black women, is that it often impacts us physically and mentally, right? So we start experiencing physical and mental health symptoms as a result of the workplace environment. And just, being a Black woman, right, is challenging in terms of dealing with all those things. But then you work so hard to get into a certain profession, and then you go into the workplace and you experience certain negative encounters, right? So what I'm wondering, sis, is if you could tell me a little bit, or tell the audience a little bit, in terms of what were some of the situations that you experienced, or the signs that, you were like, that kind of made you question, like, what is going on here?
Yeah. So in my environments, I've always been a first or an only. So been like part of it. And I realized that, I've always been very bold in speaking my truth, but sometimes people would say, no one's ever said that before, so it must not be true. So it was negating my truth or trying to downplay my truth. And I think that, I began to question whether it was real, because I'm the only one who's experiencing what's going on. And we often, that it comes back, people try to then highlight like our personalities and say, oh, it's you, it's your tone, all of that bucket of identifiers that people try to place on us as Black women. I experienced that for so many years. I think I always have, always being the other. But just some signs, I think that's a sign, but I think there's a sign too where it's the gaslighting, it's the gaslighting across the board, where people also ignore the situations and they try to reconstruct the narrative so that what does not appear to be as bad.
Right. So they downplay it, minimize it, discount it, right? And then also with gaslighting, as you said, it caused you to question yourself. Like, was that me, or did I do what? Was that off, right? So then it causes that constant questioning, and it makes you just uncertain in your work environment, right?
And I want to say something about that too. The reason that I think that happens a lot is because of that pioneerism, that blueprint. When you don't, like on both sides, when you don't have the path, when you don't have the blueprint, you don't know this is normal. And so it does come back. And when you're talking about data, evidence, there's no track record. So, I think there's something about that blueprint and not having one that also impedes one's ability to move forward and to just kind of negate that negativity,
Right. And, given that we are both Spelman alum, we were in an environment where we were nurtured and celebrated, and there was so much Black excellence around us, taught we could do anything, we're the change of the world, all these different things, right? And also, as part of our hymn, Undaunted by the Fight. Yeah. So part of what we do is that when we experience difficulty, we fight harder, right? So we feel like, this is not going to, take me over, right? So do you think that has contributed to you still being in that environment, or are there other factors that have contributed to you staying in that environment?
Yeah, I think it's my upbringing too. I have to just really talk about coming from rural Alabama with parents who were much older than I was, but they taught during segregation. And up in Alabama, I remember my dad telling me about going to school at Alabama State University during the Montgomery bus boycott. And he, I was like, well, what was it like to be a college student during that time? And he said, we often hear about the images, the things that happened in Birmingham and Bull Connor, the University of Alabama, and George Wallace. But he told me George Wallace gave a mandate to people at Alabama State University, any teacher, any professor who participated in the bus boycott, he said would be fired, and any
Ooh,
student be expelled from Alabama State University. But they still,
wow.
and my dad talked about the bombings that happened. Like, it wasn't,
Mm,
like I said, 16th, was it 16th Avenue or 16th Street, the one in Birmingham, but
uh-huh.
it was frequent. Like, you would go to the cafeteria and you'd hear about a bombing, in somewhere in the city, and it was just
Mm,
that fear. Like, if you think about the
yeah,
trauma of our people, that's something.
yeah.
But I said that story to say that that's who raised me. Like, as
Mm-hmm,
who lived during that time and knew about intimidation and everything,
mm-hmm,
feel that my father almost kind of went on the other side of just saying, you're going to be this strong Black woman. You are not going
mm-hmm,
to be hated by any person, by any
mm-hmm,
organization. Like, this is who you are. And I only realized, like, he passed away 4 years ago this
mm-hmm.
week. And, when I was at his service, I realized that he and my mother had placed so much of this in me that it was the norm. And so I did element, it kind of was like the icing on the cake, but that
Yeah.
is absolutely like my ancestor, and the people who came before me. And another side thing, I know I'm going off, but this is why I say it's also genetic. But Al Sharpton is my cousin also.
Wow.
So we looked at this, and so somehow there's that activism in my spirit, and I
Mm-hmm,
believe that that's what drives me. Like, I'm not going
mm-hmm.
to run from an organization where I belong. I have the credentials, and I
Right.
stay there to impact the system, not be run off by the system.
Right, right, right. So you have the grounding of your family, right, in terms of knowing who you are, knowing your worth, and that keeps you there to dismantle all the oppression in that system,
Absolutely.
right? And so I think it's important for us also to also talk about, because you talked about your dad and what he shared with you in terms of his history, but also in terms of in our communities, we know that our parents have to talk with us often, right? So in terms of how people might perceive us and how we have to work twice as hard and that we might not get as much, all these different things, right? And so that does make us strong in a sense. And then we have that stereotype of the strong Black woman. So, we are strong, but there's times that we crack, right? Or that we fall or we need support because sometimes we're in these environments where there's like all out psychological warfare on you, right? So you have that psychological armoring from your parents, your family, Spelman, but sometimes it kind of gets in there. It kind of gets into the armor, right? So what were some examples that maybe you have experienced where you were like, this is kind of getting to me?
Yeah. So as a leader, so I have a post on my Instagram, and I kind of broke this down into some different visuals. But in my reflection, I realized that when I came in as a leader, I was ignored. Like, there were people who, some people didn't want me to be in charge, and so they would work through other people instead of speaking to me. And these are people
Wow.
I supervise, and I didn't know you could do that, because you know what? I don't think I could do that. But of course,
Right.
so it was being ignored. It was having information withheld from me. So
Hmm.
information. So say I'm new in the organization, and there are people who know, where the, what the data are, what the processes are, etc. But
Hmm.
from scratch. And so it was like, whatever that secret file was, I didn't get the secret file. And I just had to try to figure out, like, who is going to be kind enough to tell me what I need to know so that I don't destroy myself. So that,
Hmm.
I also talk about cliques. There are people who, like, you could be a leader, but if they somehow retain power by grouping up and by kind of
Hmm.
by planning,
Right.
and so that's one as well. And so it's really just overall that feeling that people don't want you there.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
so many things to show you that you're not wanted, and it's
Hmm.
a form of sabotage. So
It is.
about the job. It is about the day-to-day drama and warfare that you mentioned that you go through to do. And,
Right. You're working to do your job, right? You're fighting to do your job. Yeah.
and I reflected a lot about this. And one thing that I realized once I got into this position was I didn't think that I could win either way. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. If I did my job well, I was going to have the attacks because there were the people who didn't want me to do my job well. And they were to come at me. If I didn't do my job well, I wasn't going to be able to keep my job.
Right.
And it's weird to be in that position where I had to choose what I wanted. Like, okay, if this is going to be bad, either way, what's up? You know what? I'm going to leave this place with a surplus of funds, over $2 million worth of funds. I am going to hire the people who are qualified to come in. I'm going to make sure that we start this graduate program. I'm going to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place. We have the policies. And so, you know, you can look at everything. Like if people point out, what did Monica Cox do? It's like bullet, 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 bullet under her leadership, like infrastructure, you know, etc. Now the other side, drama. Yep. That part I couldn't control, but I said, bring it. Bring the drama because I'm going to do my job. But use that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So sis, can you tell us, you know, because you're talking about like you're a purpose-driven, you know, focus, right? So you're like, I'm going to be doing this, like this is not going to stop me, right? So you just keep going. But how in the moment, like how are you coping during the moment, like the day-to-day with these constant assaults? I think that's helpful for us to hear. What was that like for you in terms of how did you get up every day and sustain yourself?
It was traumatizing, you know, and I'm kind of looking away. Like there's a moment like, you know, I have to compose myself because I still kind of feel it. I lost a lot of sleep. So it was hard. My mind would race so much thinking about the job and building, but also wondering, like coming up with strategies so that I could do the job that I needed to do. So it was just a mess all over the place. Wow. I cried a lot. Oh my gosh, I cried like all the time. I would, you know what? I saw my building. Like I would get in the garage before I went into the building and I would look at the building because it was an open garage and I would just cry before I even got out of my, I was crying. And I knew that, you know, I knew that this didn't feel right, but I didn't have another plan. You know, I felt that, you know, this was a dream. It was on that path to be, you know, a dean, a provost, and a president. And I didn't plan. And so when you don't have another plan, it's like, what am I going to do? Because my family moved here. My family relies on me. I'm just going to have to suck it up. And I feel I sacrificed a lot, but I still think that I did not believe that the situation was as bad because nothing in me as a human thought that humans could do that to other people. I had never experienced that. You know how you see. And there were people who actually told me with what happened to me, with what I experienced, they said they'd seen it on TV, but not in real life. They're like, this is not real. But it is real. This happened. Lifetime, TV, HBO, drama. This is life. You know what's so weird? This is how I knew it was up. I used to love me some Lifetime TV. I used to love like the drama and, you know, like the off people and, you know, like all the psychological things. Let me tell you something. I have not watched a Lifetime movie in a minute because I say our life is a Lifetime movie and that ain't even that's not cute to me anymore. I don't want to watch it because there would be triggers. When I would see people be quite right and I saw plots, I was like, oh no, boo, I went through this. I can't watch that on TV because that mess is real. That's my life. Right. There's a show called The Chair on Netflix. It has Sandra Oh in it, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, let's see how real it is. I watched one episode of that, and I said, you know what? this is tame compared to my life. I am not watching the rest of this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you were living trauma every day, right? And so as you're in the car, you're triggered by just seeing the building, right? So what did you say to yourself? What did you do to even get into the building? And then to function while you're in the building?
So, I mean, let me start back just a little bit. So even
Mm-hmm.
before campus, I was on the phone with people. I live like 20 miles from work. So I have this person I call a bad day buddy. She's a Spelman sister as well. She's a professor. I would get up. She would sometimes talk me all the way to work. I had a spiritual mentor. I was talking about stuff like it was like getting myself ready. Sometimes I would be praying on my way to work, just trying to get myself together. And so I'm sorry, I think I forgot the question you asked, but I started back, but you asked me what was it like?
Well, I was asking, well, because you talked about, just seeing the building was triggering, right? So you started crying. So like, how were you able to get out the car? Like, what did you say to yourself as you were getting out the car, as you were going in the building and throughout the day?
You know what? I relied on social media. Social media was very comforting to me. And, I do have, my 23,000 followers.
On Twitter. You should follow her.
Thank you. At Dr. Monica Cox, thank you so much. But yeah, you know what? It was almost like I had to separate myself from that environment. I had to look to see, are there other people like me, or can I somehow form a community, or can I to see if people are like real time talking about some of the issues that I'm going through. And, I follow someone and then they became my friends. And so the reason I built my community is because I needed a community that was outside of it was almost like when you think about people who have like these fantasy lands or, these other universes that they go to, I had to find something else that was different so that I could make it every day.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And humor.
Yeah.
You know what? We rely on humor and so many things like that. I've done comedy before, and it's like I had to cope by finding the humor in certain things. And I know it's like, what does that even mean? But I am a storyteller. I just finished writing a fiction book that is being edited right now. But it's that part, the creative part of me, starting a business, creating resources for people. And that's where the blogs have come from. That's where the quotes, the mugs, the shirts. It's me saying, okay, if I'm going to go through this, I build something for someone else so they don't have to go through it. And so I always that my brand has been, anytime I go through it, I don't want someone else to. And that's it. That's going. It's like other people in the community that motivated me. And that's why I spoke on Twitter, because I said, no other woman of color is going to go through this at this. That is why I still stay too. Like today I was in a meeting. I don't go to campus very much, but our first Black woman provost came to my college. There were about 10 people there. I told you, I do not go to campus if I don't have to, but I'm going to go. And so we had a conversation, and we asked, there was an opportunity for me to sit with the number 2 person at my organization. And, this is what I told her. I don't think I'm betraying confidentiality or anything by saying this. This is my words. But, she asked the question of, like, what keeps you here? And, I said, you keep me here because you know what? I have to believe that this culture is going to change. That this organization bringing in a Black woman means Black women will be protected in this organization. So, no pressure, but all the pressure is on you to make sure that people are protected. And so it's that part. It's holding long enough to be in the room so that when change comes, it's like, sis, let me tell you, it was rough. And some of us are still out here bleeding. Some of us are still out here bleeding, but we got you, and make sure no one after me or you or whomever is slaughtered. And that's
right.
all the time. You know,
Right.
slaughtered and to be thrown away. And no one have to go through that.
Right. It's like you're truly like walking in the steps of Harriet Tubman, right? So you're paving the way for others so they don't have to live like that. And that's a higher level of healing. So it's like you're healing yourself, but you also want to heal or prevent other people from experiencing a certain type of trauma. Yeah. And I was thinking about, as you said, you know, as you're driving to work, you have your community. As you are at work, you have your social media community, right? So it's like that saying, I'm walking as if I have 10,000 ancestors behind me. So you had people, you had your community around you, even if they weren't physically there with you. So how long, or would you say, how would you manifest healing in this process, right? Because you're still in the environment, right? And people often say, well, you can't heal in the same environment where you got hurt or that hurt you, right? But it does sound like you have been manifesting healing. So can you tell us, how have you done that? What have you done?
Yeah, so you know what? I have a standing appointment every week to go to therapy. That's something that I do. And I talk it through. I have a Black woman therapist who talks with me about what I've gone through. But, you know, I talk about other things in my life as well. And that check, I have that, you know, mental health check that goes. Of course, you know, I have a very supportive husband. And unfortunately, we do talk probably at 4 a.m. A lot of times, like, I'm talking. I am that person. When I wake up, I'm like, you know what happened today? Let me tell you, blah, blah, blah. Always been married for 20 years, and I'm just like, I gotta process at whatever time we're gonna do this. So that's something. And someone talked to me about building as I battle. She asked me, how do you build as you battle? And I love that. And you know, I think that, what is it? My healing, you know, it's a mindset. So I'm so happy I'm able to talk about this, because I do reflect a lot, I write a lot, and it's as if I don't really believe the organization. Like, it sounds weird, but there were things that happened, and I've learned how not to absorb that. I've learned to believe it. And so I know who I am, and I know there was abuse, even if people don't acknowledge there was abuse. And I think there's such that.
Absolutely.
I can walk in a room and I'm like, you know what? You lied. But I'm even getting to a point where I see people, I'm like, you know what? That person doesn't even have the courage. That person didn't have the courage to speak up. It's not in them to do this. And it's hard to see, like, I expected so much from people who don't even have it in them to do what I do.
Right.
I can't expect that. Like, I have a toddler.
Right.
I can't expect my toddler to drive a car. These are some really people. And what do I do with that? I can't control them. That's what I learned in therapy. You're going to love me. Hold it. Let me be excited for a moment. What do I know? I can't control them. I can control me, but I can't control them. And people used to say this thing to me, which may be a little bit controversial, but it's us. I used to get so angry, keeping it real. And I'd be like, those people are going to hell. You know, I mean, it just made me feel good to say that, you know, to hell. You know what my husband said?
What?
He said, they're already there.
Ooh. Wow.
He said, anyone who will do that to anyone is not living the life that you think they are. And you know what? When he said that, I thought about it. And it's not because I'm braggy about, like, oh, you know, they're going to hell. Not literally, but it's the fact that your mentality. What is your mindset when you wake up and you do that? And one, maybe you're not aware, maybe you don't get it. But guess what? That's a hard life to live, because there's no peace in that. There's no rest in that. And
you're living in misery. You're living in misery because you're trying to bring other people down to help yourself feel better, right? And so I can't even imagine living a life like that. You're right. It is like they're living a life of hell.
Absolutely. And, you know, we are compassionate people too. And I was talking to someone about that too. You know, we as a people will always get beat down, but we're like, you know what? We just gonna be compassionate. But I do feel that there's another thread that comes in that too, because if you have that poison, that bitterness, all that other stuff, if you're like, I'm just going to spend, 25 years going after that person, you're missing
Mm.
you're missing your family, you're missing your health,
Yeah.
need you. And I
And that
think,
takes up all your energy.
yes,
You can
right?
do other things.
Exactly. And so, I've said this. I lost a position, I lost some money, but you know what? That's going to be restored. I mean, how do I even think about this? I don't need a formal title because I'm a leader. I mean, every day people tell me I'm a leader. When there are people, I talk about the shirt, you talk about being an influencer. When I have people buy mugs and shirts and things with my name on it and they don't know me, you know what? My words are resonating. So I don't need a formal title from an organization to say I'm a leader
Exactly.
right now. So you know what?
Exactly.
That's the system. We talk about systemic, oppression and all that. The fact idol and whatever. That's a man-made thing. That is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's built on insecurity, right? So you need like this title to give a sense of more importance, but you know your worth, right? So you know how you stand, you know what you bring to the table.
Yes.
But sometimes people need that sense of worth to help them feel better. But I think also it's important for us to recognize that you have gone through something and you've experienced post-traumatic growth, like I told you before, right? So it's like you have gone through trauma, you're still going through trauma, but as a result of that, you're growing in ways that you probably wouldn't have grown in areas before, right?
Yes, and you know what? I would not have started this business. I wouldn't have started this branch of my business. I would not have. I would have been like, I'm fine. I don't need to push the boundaries, but I think it's pushed me that way. And also in terms of resources, like all of my needs have been met. And I'm gonna tell you something else I know. Like I had a supplement, and I'm talking, tens of thousands of dollars in my position that I lost when I no longer had that position. But you know what? Now that I'm on the other side, I'm like, you know what? That's some dirty money. I don't want that. The lack of rest, the lack of rest that came was not worth that. You couldn't pay me $500,000 or whatever for that stress. And
right.
I'm at that point in my life where my peace is more important to me than the money.
Right. Right.
Doing things in ways that help me to go to sleep at night and be around people, you know what? It's safety. Be around people who I feel support me and people trying to take me down, because I don't know if there are any studies out there, but I've said this before. I would really be interested in knowing if people have looked at the life expectancy of, academics and people who go through what we go through, because we haven't been in the academy that long. Think about it. We as like Black women academics, maybe we came, a few of us, the 60s or, something, but how many years has this taken off our life? Because it's so stressful. And you know what? I'm going to tell you what, I don't know one, and I'm just saying Black because it's what I know. So I like, context that I know, but I don't know one Black woman, like I'm in engineering and I see a lot of professors, they will stay there. You have to take them out in a coffin. 80 years old, 90 years old, still in their research labs, because that's them. And I was like, about somebody that would stay there. It's because they're treated well. You don't a place until you're 85 years old if you're treated with respect, if the students treat you with respect, if you're paid well, if you're the accolades. But you know what? I don't know any Black woman in my profession who's like, you know what? I'm gonna be in there till I'm 75. No, I want to be out by 50 if I could. If somebody could get me, I'd be gone. And it's because of the environment. It's because someone wrote a book. It was an edited book, and it was called Presumed Incompetent, and they had 2 volumes. And it's that place where we often are not given the benefit of the doubt. And when you come into a place and you have to prove yourself every time, like you prove yourself when you get your doctorate, you have
you think that's enough, right?
But you're proving yourself to like 18-year-olds. You're proving yourself to staff. You're proving yourself to people who've never been in a department or in a unit, and that weighs you down and out, and that's what has the ability to weigh on your mind, because you're like, am I bright? People talk imposter syndrome. We sometimes get that mixed up. No, that's just racism, sexism, all the other stuff too. It's the fact that we never seen anyone like you. They're putting you in a box. But yes,
Right.
you're
Absolutely. In fact, you're more than qualified to even be in that place, right? Because you had to go through so many hurdles to even get there. And it's low. I think what you're saying, Dr. Sis, is that we have to understand our worth, right? Because these things are going to happen to kind of sway us or do all these different things. But if we don't know our worth, then it is hard for you to do the things that you actually have done. You have said, you know what, I need therapy. You go get therapy, right? You have gone into rooms and you can see people for who they are, but you don't get pulled into it. You're like, you know what? I see what you are, but I'm not going to be sucked into this, right? So you're able to pull back in some way and have those boundaries, which is so important because that's a part of healing, is that you see things as they are, but you don't get sucked into the toxicity. Because the toxicity, you're right, can take over and cause destruction. And I know well, I'm not aware of any studies, but I do know on social media, a lot of Black women in academia are coming out about the workplace bullying they're experiencing, which is atrocious, right? And what's so interesting and so sad, across professions. So I hear it across the board. It doesn't matter what profession. I hear that Black women are experiencing workplace bullying. And just think about our health outcomes, right? Already we're disproportionately impacted by health issues. But think about what impact does all this stress has on hypertension, diabetes, all of these different things. And so it's important for us to be open about these conversations so we know that we're not alone, right? And so that we also start finding ways for us to seek support so that these jobs don't kill us. It's not worth it.
absolutely.
It's not worth it.
Many of us are also taking care of people. Like I am a caregiver for my mom, and I have a small child, and actually, I got pregnant and had a baby while I was going through all this, which is another issue. So I was in my 40s as well, very, just high risk. And I could tell you about all that stuff too. But, it's like we have to realize that if we care about those who are around us, we have to take care of ourselves. And I often think I am an only child. I told you my father passed. My mom is a stroke survivor, but I take care of my mother. So like you asked me also, how did I approach this, or, what is my healing like? It's the fact that I also draw up on the fact that I am a caregiver to remind me to put my oxygen mask on, because if I don't put my oxygen mask on, I can't help anyone else. And so that motivates me too. I be here and be in my right mind, strong if no one else is, but I choose to be strong for my family. I choose to be strong for those I love, because that's legacy to me. That's important. That's honor. And I want to honor people who honor me, but also need me and love me the way that I truly want to be loved and need to be loved. So that's it. And you know what? This is a key too. I feel like you pulling it all from me. Tell me if I'm talking too much.
It's okay. It's all good.
But it's my aha moment of a lot of this is just transactional. Like so often we put our emotions into the workplace. And I have learned that the workplace is not my husband. The workplace not, any of those things that are just like that are really important to me. And if you look at a very transactional perspective, my new thing that I say is that we are leasers and we are renters, and that space does not belong to us. Like, yes, we need to be stewards of what we are doing, but we do not. It is not written that we have to give every bit of our life to those organizations. They'll go on.
Right.
And so once again, you talked about boundaries, but being really protective of that space and that you can always find another job, but life.
Exactly. And also your priorities. What's most important to you is your family, not your job, right? Like you go to your job to, help provide for your family and to do certain things intellectually, but that doesn't define you, right? And so it's kind of hard because we kind of get into that kind of grind kind of culture, but we have to say, no, that's not who I am. So I want to ask you, Dr. Cobbs, I know we talked about this offline. So when you are experiencing these difficult situations in the workplace,
Mhm.
I'm sure people were observing what was happening, right? So I call those bystanders, right? So how did the bystanders respond to the negative treatment that you were receiving?
Man, there's a lot. There's a lot to say here. One of my faculty is actually on here. He's cool. I don't know if he's still on here, but it'll be interesting. I'm not telling him to chime in, but what was it like? It was a lot, and I'm gonna tell you why it was difficult, because I was in a position of power. So I also had to remain confidential about some things. Like when you are in a place, you can't just go and be like, hey, Susie is doing this. Now let me put all her business in the street. Like I couldn't fight. I couldn't fight. Like, it wasn't peer to peer. It was,
Right.
Michelle Obama's high road. You take the high road. Like there are some things that you can't say until you leave office.
Right.
And, in the midst of it, I think some people just did not know what was going on, because I tell them, they may have seen it, but what I found was that there were people who had their own stories. A lot of people were telling the stories. They weren't the right stories, but integrity would not let me tell my story at the time. Now I'm not anymore. So you see, I'm doing all the IG lives and all the stuff. If I was still there, I still would not come forth, because I just feel like there is that space where no matter how hateful someone was to me, I'm still their supervisor. I'm still in that unit, and I would not do that. I would try to go through within the organization, which may or may not work, but that's where some of this came from. A lot of the torture came from the fact that the system required me to be silent.
Ooh. That's rough.
To keep my position, that was the conflict.
Right, because silencing is a form of oppression, right? And so you were further oppressed in not being able to say certain things.
Absolutely, because it wasn't. It violated confidentiality, like I said. It was a lot, and that's the reality in these organizations. Like many people have to remain silent, and I can't tell you the number of people who are in high positions who I've talked to, and to keep that position, they can't expose the wrong. They cannot things that are happening. They can't break down and show that they even have cracks in their armor, because they're as weak leaders, and they will be kicked out of the system, because the system is about conformity. The system is about upholding,
maintaining the system.
It is. Even if it harms people in the system, that's meant to do. And so, I guess what I would say to the people here is that you also have to be really careful. Stacey Abrams has this book, and I have it over here, but it's like leading from, she's our Spelman sister too.
Yeah, she is.
Lead from the outside, really book. And I've often talked about being on the inside in organizations and then being on the outside of organizations. So I've seen the inside and I've seen the outside. The inside is kind of like, you look at a Kamala Harris, when you look at comparisons. Kamala Harris has a formal title. She is Vice President of the United States of America, first woman of color. Amazing. But you know what? Kamala Harris doesn't get out of that box very much. You don't see her out. Like she may get a little bit, but she has to maintain that system that operates in to stay in the system. Now, Stacey Abrams wanted to be governor, but you see, she has revolutionized voting rights.
Post-traumatic growth.
Absolutely, but it's from the outside. And so what I'm saying too is that I just tell people, you have to think about it when, like, the inside costs, and are you to pay the cost, because the inside can kill you. The outside,
it can.
Outside can kill you in a very different way. Like, activism, I've been threatened. I have all this stuff that goes on, like the John Lewis's. That's a different press. But I feel, for me, it's stress on my own terms. It's me saying, and owning it. Like, stop playing diversity. Oh, blah, blah, blah. You said this. You know what? I back that up all day. But when you're inside and people say, tell me I have to oppress other people, or they tell me I can't even speak up for myself because it goes against the norms of the organization, that's a completely different way of
well, that's a slow death. That's a slow death. It's like you're losing your voice, you're being silenced, and you're being complicit not only in your oppression, but the oppression of other people, right? So how do you sit with that? That's misery, like your husband said, right? And at some points, some people internalize that because they're so miserable, and it starts coming out in how they start treating people and become a part of the system. So thinking about, now what you've done, and now you're in out, right? So you're in a different position. And initially it could have seemed like, oh, that was traumatic. They did something horrible to me. But as you mentioned before, this has broadened your eyes to something that you never would have thought about before, right? So you're in out, but in a way that now you have more of that voice, and you refuse to be silenced. Because it's like, well, what else can you do to me, right? I think about Iyanla Vanzant, and she was like, something happened to her. She was like, my soul just broke wide open. Yeah. Like I couldn't, I'm open now. There's nothing else that you could do to make me silence. And so it sounds like that is what has happened to you. And so you've been manifesting healing by sharing your truth. And by sharing your truth, the hope is that you help other people, other Black women, share their truth so they don't have to go through what you went through, right?
Yeah, and it's the saying, and it's like, if you know better, do better.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot now, and I knew, like, Black women started coming to me and telling me their stories, and that's what got me. It's like, when I was on the inside, I was so focused on the business and building the system that I didn't pay attention to people outside of my area. But saw how bold I was. They started telling me that my words resonated with them, and they started asking me for advice. And it's that part. It really got to me, and I could no longer. I feel like it's a calling. I've said this. It's put me into a different place, because I may have told you this, but I'll tell the listeners here too. I was on Twitter, and the thing that shifted for me is that I get direct messages all the time, and someone sent me a direct message, and she said she was going through a really hard time in grad school, and she had thought of taking her life, but my words kept her going. And I said, that's like tears, just tears. It's scary to even think about it now, because all I do is live my life. All I do is share something. And the fact that people now tell me they thought that they were alone, but the fact that I'm bold enough to come out and be like, this happened to me, does something for them. And even to call with someone, they had asked me for some type of advice. There was some oppression that was happening, and I didn't know it, but they said, I want you to know that the situation improved, and this person was almost on the verge of being homeless, but because your words and because of your advice, this person now is able to continue doing what they're doing. And it's that part. I never thought that.
It's like you're manifesting healing by example. So people are seeing your example, they're hearing what you're saying, and that's helping them in terms of going in a different direction in their lives. So I want to, as we're winding down, sis, I want you to tell just a little bit about your, business, right? Like, what are you doing? How can people contact you besides the shirt and the mugs, right? What other services are you providing?
Yeah, so I am coaching people. I've coached some people in career development. I have 3 areas. One is business strategy, so kind of social media. If people want to learn, how to build their brand on social media and just talk, while you work in the workplace, that's something I can talk about. I have career development, which is everything that I've known to do. So I've done a lot for faculty. But you know what? I do a lot for other people too. Graduate students, people who work in K-12 education. And then the last is diversity, equity, and inclusion. I had this tweet that was viewed over 4 million times, and it was me just talking. And it was like, almost like stop playing diversity, but I have engaged with people who want to know how to do real diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So, you know, we're going to diversity. What do those diversity statements look like? How do you do this so that people aren't harmed? How do you really make sure that people are leaving whole? And then I also care about the people themselves. So people who are in a situation and it's like, it's time to move. I help people about their boundaries, you know, to really their plan should be and how to move forward. And let me tell you about my business real quick. The thing that's funny is that I was always afraid to launch the business. Always afraid to kind of do this. I know that just sounds weird, but I was kind of like, you know, I'm a professor and I'm a, you know, dab in some stuff. You know what? I have like consultations on my website, drmonicacox.com. And every time I had a consultation, someone was like, well, I want you to coach me. How much does it cost? And so it was kind of backwards because people would come to me and I was like, okay, let me get a coaching agreement. Let me tell you what's up. Let me start scheduling because I felt so compelled to talk to people. And so I do have a coach I work with. And the thing that she says is that my business is really organic. You don't see, well, I'm starting to market now, but I was marketing a lot. I was not out there just being like, hey, y'all, you know, come in, you know, let's do this. I'm just trying to be bold because there's still a part of me that can't believe it. And that is not, I'm not trying to say that's false humility. It's very much like, I am Monica. I am like Monica Cox, not even like the Dr. Monica Cox, though but I'm normal. Like I'm talking to you.
You're real. You're real. And you're about real talk, right? So you have titles and prestige and all that, but you are like all about the real talk and you're all about helping other people, right? And if they can learn from what you've gone through, that's who you are. That's who you are. And it was like you were saying before that, you know, I didn't want to do my own business or whatever. I'm a university professor, but the universe was saying to you, sis, nah, there's something bigger for you, right? And you just had to step into it. Fear and all.
I know.
Fear and all.
You know what? Sometimes I this is where it was. I realized that I'm shy and I'm also bold at the same time because people would say such nice things to me. Like I would literally close my laptop and kind of blush about it because it was funny. It's still funny to me when people say stuff. And so, you know, I just know I want to remain humble. And I want to help people. Like at the end of the day, I want to make sure that people are whole and they're not stressed and go through the trauma that we've talked about. Like they need to know they are better than that. Even if, I mean, you know what I mean? I think that there's so my former pastor used to say this too. You know, people always say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But you know what? Sticks and stones can injure you. They may not kill you. But for you can have scars. And so often people are like, well, whatever. If it didn't kill me, it's okay. But no, scars and bruises hurt too. And you shouldn't have those. And, you know, that's where I am too. Even if you have the bruise, it's like, yeah, here's my scar, but it doesn't hurt anymore. And now, you know, I have a tattoo or I've made it pretty or I put, like whatever it is, but it's like something that is now helping me to be unique. Is something that allows, you know, it's a conversation starter. I meet new people and I'm able to help them so that they don't feel embarrassed by the scars or the wounds.
But it's also the vulnerability and honesty to say, I've been hurt or I'm hurting, right? And as a people, we historically, you know, people didn't care if we were hurting. You know what I'm saying? They're like, still go work, whatever, right? And so we, you know, reclaiming, no, I've been hurt, and saying it's okay to get that help even when people tell us to keep going. No, we're getting help, okay? And then also the part that you said, sis, about, you know, spending time with your family, with your husband, with your son, that's reclaiming our joy. And our joy is so healing. And so many times we lose sight of that, right? So we have to remember and reclaim our joy because that helps heal us too. So I want to thank you, sis, for joining today. And also I wanted to say that, you know, I had this vision of doing like every Monday, doing something about workplace bullying because Bullying Prevention Month is October, right? And so I said, you know what? I think we need to talk about Black women and workplace bullying because I hear it so often. So I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story, but also sharing your healing process, which is still a process, right? And that to let the listeners know that every Monday in October, we're going to be talking about workplace bullying with a different Black woman. And so next week we have Dr. TK, who is a licensed clinical psychologist. And we also have women coming in who've actually written about working in toxic work environments and the impact on Black women. So my hope is that you'll join in for the future IG Lives every Monday, same time. And we'd just love for you to just really sit and think about the things that we're talking about and think about ways that you can incorporate that into your life to promote your own healing. So thank you, sis. I appreciate you. And I know we'll be talking. We talked about other things maybe down the line. But I appreciate you. And I'm following you all the time on Twitter.
Our community. So this is an example. You and I went to the same school. We would never meet each other probably, but it's that community. You connected to me, I connected to you, and you did something. You followed up with me to say we need to do something. So this is a great example. So I want to thank you for reaching out to me and for making me a part of your village now, because
absolutely.
My healing, like, you're a professional. You know I'm about to be up in your DMs and text messages like, what's happening today? Oh, help me out. Give me some advice.
Yes. And just to share with our listeners, you know, what you and I know already, you know, just to share with you that our bit from our Spelman hymn, you know, we're undaunted by the fight, right? So we know that being in this society, that it's a constant fight. We will continue to fight, but we will rest also because we need to rest. And we're hurting. We're going to acknowledge we're being hurt, and we're going to get the support we need. If it's mental health, you know, therapy, whatever it might be, we know there's stigma in our community about mental health. We need to break through that because we are hurting and we need that support. Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.